If you're a graduate looking for a job in banking right now, you might be anxious about AI swooping in and replacing your job. If JPMorgan is anything to go by, you're right to be worried. Using AI and outsourcing, the bank is planning to replace up to 2/3 of its highest paying junior roles. But don't expect working conditions to get any better. Find out why on the Coffee Run. Every day on eFinancialCareers.com, we give you a rundown of news in banking, finance, and beyond on morning coffee. On the Coffee Run, we break down the biggest story of the week and let you know other important stories you might have missed. We unfortunately weren't able to post last week, so our top story today is the biggest of the last fortnight. Today's top story from CNBC focuses on JPMorgan's AI efforts. The bank using AI is potentially reducing its proportional number of junior bankers to senior managers from 6-1 to 4-1. Of those that survive, only half will be working from the highest paying cities. The rest will be working in lower cost locations like Bengaluru in India and Buenos Aires in Argentina. For the highest paying junior roles, therefore, you might be correct in assuming a 2/3 reduction. The bank is cutting down on the number of analysts needed by integrating LLM Suite, a portal allowing bankers to use LLMs from various top providers including OpenAI and Anthropic. Derek Waldron, Chief Analytics Officer at JPMorgan, proved just how much of the work of banking analysts this LLM Suite will replace. He gave it the following prompt. You are a technology banker at JPMorgan Chase, preparing for a meeting with the CEO and CFO of NVIDIA. Prepare a 5-page presentation that includes the latest news, earnings, and a peer comparison. Waldron said that within about 30 seconds, it produced a PowerPoint deck that would have had teams of investment banking analysts working long hours at night to do. Obviously, the technology isn't unanimously in use in banking today, so many analysts are still working long hours into the night to make those PowerPoints. The severity of working conditions ebbs and flows. After a survey from Goldman Sachs analysts leaked showing that it was common for juniors to work 100-hour weeks, various banks cracked down and set hard limits for their analysts. In recent years, though, as deal flow has increased, analysts are back to working crazy hours again. At some banks, they may have never stopped. In a viral series of TikToks, Jonathan Tristan, an ex-bulge bracket banking analyst, said his bank had an unwritten rule that analysts could only take 5 days of PTO per year, and they'd be encouraged to work half days when they were debilitatingly sick. Last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that some senior bankers at Bank of America were encouraging juniors to work off the books and report fewer hours than they were working. With AI now doing all the work, you might think these late nights for junior bankers will go away. You might be wrong. The reason bankers pull these long hours isn't necessarily because they've always got something to do. Tristan likened analysts to on-call doctors. The work you do isn't usually extreme or taxing unless you're working on a live deal, but your value comes from being always available regardless of the request. While less analysts will be needed, this might not change. After all, if an MD has ChatGPT create a pitch deck, please fix may just turn into please check. Waldron of JPMorgan suggested to CNBC just that, saying roles inhabited by makers today could be done by checkers tomorrow. Should things be forced to change though? A number of high-profile deaths in banking suggest so. Leo Lucanus, a Bank of America associate, was thought to have worked 100-hour weeks before dying of heart complications. Bank of America's internal systems suggested he wasn't working those hours, which prompted Wall Street Journal's investigation into off-the-books working. Carter McIntosh of Jefferies reportedly died due to substance abuse. Abuse of ADHD medications like Adderall are rampant in finance today to facilitate working those long hours, although McIntosh reportedly took a combination of cocaine and fentanyl. JPMorgan's new flagship New York office also suggests that late-night working will continue. It makes a number of its amenities, including food and its gym, available 24/7. The hope, though, is that because of the less intensive work required as AI adoption increases, analysts may be able to work shorter shifts in smaller teams that overlap with one another. We won't really know, though, until we get there. That's not the only top story in finance this week. While Q3 was shaping up to be a pretty good quarter for most financial services firms, the collapse of automotive parts supplier First Brands has made a lot of teams very uncomfortable. Not least among them is O'Connor & Co., a hedge fund business that was in the midst of being sold to Cantor Fitzgerald by UBS. A strategy in one of its pods had significant exposure to First Brands, so that pod is now being either left out of the deal or reducing the sale price, or it's doing both. Across O'Connor and other funds, UBS held over $500 million of exposure to First Brands. On the flip side, anyone who steered clear of First Brands gets to do a victory lap. Michael Gatto, a partner at investment firm Silver Point, said First Brands had a very aggressive founder and very bad financial disclosures. If that's the case, then why did so many people get tangled up? Goldman Sachs analysts estimated that First Brands was paying interest of up to 30% on some of its short-term borrowing. And last week, former Citi banker Vittoria Okuyama spoke to Business Insider about her experience with burnout and how psychedelic drugs helped her get through it. Okuyama said that while working at Citi, she would work 16-hour days for 3 months straight, with just Saturdays as a protected day off. After 9 months in the role, she would cry daily and have panic attacks. Despite her managers reducing her workload, she suffered a breakdown and took a 13-week leave of absence. During that, she went on a week-long ayahuasca retreat in the Amazon, which she said allowed her to completely disconnect from the outside world and to reconnect with herself. She ended up leaving Citi a few months after returning from her leave. Okuyama's not the first banker to discover ayahuasca, but most find it after they leave the industry. Saad Shah, a former banker at RBC in Canada, worked at a hedge fund in 2009 when he was invited to attend an ayahuasca ceremony in Brazil, which he said changed him as a person and eradicated his fears. He now runs a venture capital firm that invests in healthcare startups involved in psychedelics. Zappi Zappalin, a former Bear Stearns VP, took ayahuasca after leaving banking and now works as a self-described psychedelic concierge to the stars. And from us at eFinancialCareers, you might be surprised to find that Revolut has a more exclusive internship program than Goldman Sachs. The fintech received more than 45,000 applications for the 2026 cohort of its RevCelerator program. It's hiring between 200 and 300 of them, which gives it an acceptance rate of as little as 0.44%. Goldman Sachs, meanwhile, brought in 0.7% of applicants that applied to its summer analyst positions. JPMorgan accepted the same proportion of candidates, while Morgan Stanley accepted 0.5% of candidates in EMEA. There are more exclusive internships on the buy side. Blackstone, for example, accepts just 0.3% of its internship applicants. It's worth noting, obviously, that these figures are somewhat inflated to the extent that anyone and everyone that applies is counted. But it's also worth noting that acceptance rates at banks look to be getting exponentially lower. At JPMorgan, for example, the acceptance rate was 0.9% in 2024 and 2.8% in 2023. If AI continues to replace junior roles, that thin percentage could get a whole lot thinner in future. Thank you for watching The Coffee Run. If you want to check out our articles, you can go to eFinancialCareers.com, or you can subscribe to our newsletter by following the link below. You can also like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to get more news updates like this every Friday.